Well, hello everybody. Welcome to Venice Area Audubon Bird ID Seminar. Now there are 525 birds in Florida. Are we going to identify them? I hope not. Of those birds, you can read this, 160 are accidentals. They just blew in on the storm. We never see them again. Verifiable exotics. But of this remaining birds, we're going to identify 8 or so that are the most common birds you're going to see. Now, I looked around at the audience. I don't think we have any actual beginners here. I think that you're all pretty up on your birds, but maybe you'll glean a little information about new ways to find a marker. So, some birds need no introduction. This is pretty clear. We know what these birds are. They never fail to take the breath away. But there are other birds, and there'll be another time in your career when not just knowing that it's a brown pelican will be enough. You're going to want to know the life phase based on plumage. And going from the left, we have this down here is an immature bird. They're immature for 4 or 5 years, the little hooligans. And then as they darken, they mature, a fully mature adult with this white nape, and then a breeding adult down here. So that is an example of knowing more about your bird based on markers other than just the silhouette. But we do have markers in no particular order of importance. The wings, they're birds, they have wings. So the size of the wings, the shape, the markings, a lot of times you can learn a lot about the lifestyle of the bird. You take, for example, this giant, magnificent frigate bird over here. It has the highest wing surface to body weight ratio of any bird. So you know that bird is going to glide. So wings tell us a lot. So do beaks. Beaks or bills, you can use them interchangeably. So our peregrine falcon over here with this tomial tooth, that's for the rapid dispatch of its victims. The cardinal, general purpose, all-purpose bill. Then we have specialists for the probing bird. And here the insectivore. So we look at the size and the shape of the bill, tells us more about how that bird is living its life and helps us identify them. Legs and feet. So we have down here, this is the American coot. Also the Australasian coot has identical feet, these big lobes. They're really for getting around on vegetation and water, dispersing the weight. The talons of an eagle to grab onto prey. And we can also see that the stilt up here on the left is able to wade out into deep water. Now, I can't tell you what the adaptational advantage is to the snowy egret to have yellow feet, but it certainly helps us identify at a glance those golden slippers. Eyes, these are another field mark. Where are they on the head? Do they face forward? Are there rings around the eyes? Are they complete rings? Is there an eye line goes through it? All of those ways. Sometimes you can't pick up every ID mark, but you can pick up enough to see what you have for your bird. Light is often bad, but you can also rely on posture and behavior. Now, the two pictures on the left are the same bird. They're black-bellied plover, usually here in Florida in non-breeding plumage. But plumage or no, this bird is alert. It's always ready to raise the alarm. It's always ready to just flee at a moment's notice. On the lower right, we have sanderlings. Now you see some little birds, peeps. We're going to talk about peeps later. Little birds, they all look alike, but if they're in a big group and they're running back and forth with the waves, they're sanderlings. And of course, we see the wood stork. He's running around and he's mucking up the dirt. Now the two asterisks here to remind me to explain that birds do not read. well, maybe some corvids do, but mostly they don't read the manual, and birds that are designated freshwater birds can be found at the beach. So the birds can go where they want to go. So let's start with some pretty easy birds. We can start with the deep divers. It's a big bird, 35 inches, the anhinga. Both male and female have this lace shawl around. The female has, shows it's pretty dark. It can be quite a champagne color, and this long dagger-like beak. The anhinga, also called the snake bird, has very little subcutaneous fat, so it has no buoyancy. And that makes it ideal as a deep diver because it can go down very fast, very deep, and spear. It's with that long bill, it spears its prey, which it has to then toss to get down face first. Compared to a very similar bird, the double-crested cormorant. Now, they're about the same size. The difference is there's less neck and there's way less in the way of tail. This is a stockier bird with a beak that has that hook at the end, and that is how the anhinga catches its fish. It too has very little in the way of subcutaneous fat, a little more than the anhinga. They don't have preen glands, so they get wet and have to dry out. So we see them side by side. These are the two birds that do dry out. We've got the anhinga, small head, long bill, low down, bigger head, higher in the water, and the hooked beak. So knowing what we know about these birds, can we tell which is which of these? Well, sure. First of all, we've got a female because she's got that champagne neck and throat, but she's just longer. She's just longer overall. Because of the wing load for this bird, the double-crested cormorant is a kind of clunky flyer. The anhinga is a more elegant flyer. So those are our divers. Let's look at dabblers. We have two teals here. The word teal, why don't you just call them ducks? Well, the word teal is Old English for little duck. We have two. The one you're more likely to see is the blue-winged teal. The green-winged teal makes for good eating and has become very, very wary of humans. And so we won't see them as much. But on the wing, and just this is the male, the dual wing scar. They have wears the white. You've got the white under the tail. If you see a little bird, the likelihood is that it's going to be a blue-winged teal. What about big ducks? Well, there are a number of ways to identify the big ducks, and we're going to just talk about 2.5 big ducks. One way is the speculum, this row of secondary feathers here, but this is all from a mallard, so they can very much be hidden or different and difficult to as a diagnostic tool. They can also be hidden. You can see here this duck and this duck here. I have something on my screen I need to. Sorry about that. That they can hide that. And you can look at the plumage is another one. So we're going to look at 2.5 big ducks. Here's our first big duck. This is when you say the word duck. This is the picture that will flit into your mind. You will want to be throwing it breadcrumbs at the pond. The male is unmistakable. That is very expensive to maintain that breeding plumage. That costs the bird a lot. So as soon as breeding is over, he will shed that. Very dark cheek. And these are the diagnostic tools. It's a dark cheek. It's a heavy, dark eye band, and a pretty clean gape. Feathers are not too distinct. They're kind of muted. This is the mallard going through this is called eclipse, when the male has lost his breeding plumage, and he looks just at that point indistinguishable from the female. His white is under the tail. Where's the white? He's got a dark cheek and a thick streak through the eye streak, the eye line. Now we have a mottled duck, just about the same size, much crisper plumage. Can you see each feather very cleanly marked? These are fresh feathers, but even so, it's just crisper looking. We have a pale cheek, a faint line through the eye, and this is diagnostic here. There is a distinct mark at the gape. You can see those feathers. So, knowing what we know, what do we have here? We look at the cheek, we look at the eye line, and we look at the gape. Cheek, eye line, gape. What do we have here? I bet you got it all right. There we have the mallard and the mottled duck. Light cheek, finer eye line, and marking at the gape. Okay, so what are these two ducks? Sort of crisp plumage. Ooh, it's a dark cheek. Oh, I don't know. And then there's a mark at the gape. What could this be? Well, this is the half duck. This is a mottled duck, and the mallards are promiscuous ducks, and they have hybridized with many duck species, and they're sort of breeding them out. So when around here, we have predominantly mottled ducks by now. Occasionally a mottled, but most of the ducks that I've been seeing are mottled. Who doesn't love a black-bellied whistling duck? I get flyovers at 6:30 every day, morning and night. They blew in from the Yucatan to Sarasota in 1984 and have really expanded their range. Very gregarious ducks. They're just too cute for words. They get the orange bill comes with age, their little mohawk they're born with, but that's a really nice duck. So we've had our divers, our dabblers, our ducks. So let's talk about stealth feeders. This is a green heron, sits poised in weight, sometimes stretched out. Beautiful plumage, but somewhat ungainly looking in flight. So if you find a bird that looks terribly top heavy, the chances are it is a green heron. They hunt in the day. The black-crowned night heron hunts at night. So you've got several things that are helping me know that this is a black-crowned night heron. It's a very stocky bird. It typically is very hunched in at the shoulders, big, thick beak, very still, very patient. Plumage matters. This bird is a juvenile, and so even without that distinctive dark gray and light gray plumage, everything else about this bird says black-crowned night heron, and that's what it is. We also have a yellow-crowned night heron, he or she of the big red eye. They are more found in the mangroves. They nest high, generally outside of the mangrove range by a little bit, pine trees and maybe some oak trees, but they're a very nice bird. And now the waders is probably the biggest group to get started on in terms of becoming confident with your bird ID. And if you can really get through these waders, which I no doubt most of you can, you'll really have a foundation. So the great blue heron is our biggest wader. I shan't forget my friend in Maine saying, "Did you see the great gray bird?" I said, "Yep, it's a great blue heron." She said, No, it was gray. I said, "Well, be that as it may, it's still called a great blue heron." Biggest bird, biggest heron that we have. This is breeding plumage here. All these great filamentous. These were very much favored by the hat trade a century and a half ago. Next biggest is the great egret. Now, of the all-white egrets, we have two. And you can see the snowy is considerably smaller. Black beak, yellow beak. Both got black legs, but the snowy has the yellow legs. In flight, The great egret is quite languorous. It just isn't taking much energy. It has all the time in the world, and there's just, it's a beautiful bird in flight. By contrast, the snowy egret is a very busy bird. It's a busy flyer. It has more beats, has those yellow feet. It dashes around. It does something sometimes called mantling, where it lifts its wings to shadow the water. A number of birds do that. And it has these yellow feet. Now, here's the first trick. One of these birds is not like the other. One of these birds doesn't belong. Can you tell which one it is? What are we looking for? That's it. It's a little blue heron down here. The beak is a little too big and too thick. The legs are gray. But wait a second, it's a little blue heron. Well, yeah, this is where plumage matters, because this is a juvenile little blue heron. I can hear some people talking, but that's okay. So here is the little blue heron in its different phases. This is the juvenile with the white. And then we have, it starts to lose its white feathers at the spring of its afterbirth year. And then this is called by some the calico phase. And then it becomes this nice blue, except for when it goes into breeding plumage, then it becomes purpley red. But it's still, you can see this paler base to the bill. The bill is very big for this bird. And that is a cranky bird. It's the bird that when they come into land, they go, ah, ah, and you say, oh, there's my little blue heron. I have one visit most days. Very similar bird to the little blue heron is the tricolored heron. They're about the same size. If it's possible to believe it, this beak is even larger in ratio to the head than the little blue heron. And of course, the tri comes from the different colors. It's gray, it's brown, it's got this orange streak down the front, and this white underwing and belly. Very often hidden, so sometimes you're going to have it. At this phase, it's kind of hard to see, but you'll find some telltale white. So in flight, one of these is a tricolor, one is a little blue, and one is a great blue. Oh, I'm not even trying with these questions. Of course, you know what they are. There we have the tricolored, the little blue, and the great blue. One thing is true is that when a single bird is in flight against the sky, it's very hard to tell size. You can't really measure how far away they are. So that's why it's helpful to have these other field marks. Cattle egret, another new arrival. I'm not sure exactly when, but they've found a little niche and they're doing very well. Breeding plumage, they get a little redder. They have, it doesn't look so much here, but they have fairly dark legs. Roseate Spoonbill, this is a bird that needs no introduction and never fails to thrill. Their color, which comes from their food, builds up in their system in time. So we would take this over here as a fairly newly hatched bird. The limpkin. Limpkins specialize in these shells. In fact, their beaks are a little off center, laterally a little off center. So it's like almost like a little corkscrew. They put their beak in and they kind of twist, and they I can't think of the tool, but anyway, they just kind of pull that snail right out. You mostly will identify the limpkin by the god-awful screeching in the middle of the night, but another way is to look at the size of the wings. This bird is wearing somebody else's wings. Those wings are just way too big. It looks like it's going to just drop out of the air. Miraculously not. But when you see, this little downward curve, it has a kind of a coming down feel to it. And these wings, they're speckled. They're very beautifully marked, and they're massive wings. A very similar bird is the glossy ibis. Again, the down curve bill, but more down curve, glossy. There's no particular markings. This looks very red. It can just always look quite black depending on the light. migrates all the way up to Maine in the summer. Its wings fit. So there you can see this bird in flight. It doesn't look quite so troubled by the effort as the limpkin, but you can see the great similarities here in the curve of the neck and the downward curved bill. But if you look at the ratio of body to wing, I think you'll be fine. Similar to the glossy is the white ibis, and another bird that you need to know the plumage. This white ibis is actually brown with a little white, looks like wearing a brown tuxedo. And in flight, the trailing wing edge is dark. The beak and the legs are very pale, not even quite flesh colored. As an adult, all of those, that trailing edge will be white, and only the emarginated primaries up here will be dark. So very little dark, very little black showing. And this is a bird in breeding mode. It's not breeding plumage. Their plumage doesn't change, but you can see all the skin around the face, the top of the beak, and the legs become truly scarlet. Sometimes I've seen birds with a little wattle. I have no idea what that does, but so that is a nice white bird with black. Here's another white bird with black. This is a breeder. The white pelican, American white pelican, breeds in the upper Midwest. It's the original snowbird, comes down here to spend the winter, the shallow waters in the bays, and it feeds. The adults form a big circle, and they herd the fish in closer and closer circles, and then they just dip their bill in. This is a bill. They dip it in to pick up the fish. This lump on the upper mandible is called a keel, and that is they make no other change to signal readiness for breeding. Their plumage stays the same. Around the eye gets maybe a little yellower, but this is what's showing. The second largest wingspan after the condor. Only a mother and Kate Borduas could love the wood stork. I think they're just fabulous. They have these wonderful feet, the primaries, and then the whole trailing edge right into the body is black. They have the fastest reflex of any vertebrate. They stir up the mud and they swing that great big beak back and forward. And when they feel something, they snap right down on it. I think a very handsome bird. So there we have our three black and white birds. This isn't even a challenge for you, is it? No. Let's see what they are. Yes, you're right. White ibis, white pelican, and the wood stork. The white pelicans are starting to flock up now to fly back north. The wood stork and the ibis will be here with us year round. Here is the most spectacular of our black and white birds, which will get its own story toward the end, the swallowtail kite. They're here now. Many of them are at Carlton or Deer Prairie Creek. They fly over where I live, which is sort of up in that area. I've seen several already, but they never fail to thrill. So how about our birds that walk on water? Here we have the common gallinule. If someone were to say, but no, it's a moorhen, you can say, well, okay, it used to be a moorhen, now it's a gallinule. And how do you tell this gallinule apart from other similar birds? It has a plimsoll line. It has this horizontal line in its plumage that's very hard to miss. And it has this front plate here, two colors, red with a little yellow tip. Juveniles aren't much to look at. The babies certainly can walk on water. This bird has very spatulate feet to distribute weight. Purple gallinule. Also, look at those feet. This is a bit bigger bird and a showier bird, prettier colors, yellow legs, no lateral line, and it has three colors in its front plate. Here we've got the white, red, and yellow, and it's just A gorgeous, gorgeous bird, a dull female, a juvenile. So this is an intentionally bad picture because those are the conditions that you will see birds. So what do we have here? Of course, the purple gallinal, because we can, even though it's faint, see that we've got 3 colors, we've got 2 colors, we've got this beautiful purple and aqua, and then in this otherwise gray bird, we've got this nice lateral stripe. Very similar. Here are those little lobed feet of the American coot. She is a good mother. She'll have a number of chicks. They're born precocial. They can do a lot for themselves. And after a while, she'll just start picking them off one by one until she's got a smaller brood left. And she's just culling the herd. It's a kind of cruel, but it's what coots do. And now between these two, what do we have? You know what it is, of course, the common gallinule and the coot. The coot has just all white down the face, a little, sometimes not terribly obvious, little, like a ring bill there. Scavengers. Now the turkey vulture is the one buzzard. They're sometimes called, I think we can give them their right name. This is a bird that hunts by smell, and you can see the size of the nostrils here as birds that eat carrion. They don't have any feathers on their head because they're sticking their heads into rotting meat, and they don't want to get that muck on their feathers. But this white tip to the bill is very visible in most lights when you're looking up. The whole trailing edge of the wing is pale, silvery pale. These birds mate for life. They're kind of quarrelsome, the turkey vultures. The black vultures are far less quarrelsome. They get along very well, very, very gregarious birds, mate for life. And they have just this hand, these primaries out here. They're very easy to distinguish. Also the black head. Oh, by the way, the turkey vultures do migrate in the summer. The black vultures stay here in Florida. Other parts of the world, they both, I mean, on the West Coast, the black vultures do migrate. They just don't do it here. So we're in flight, and we have to know what these birds are. Of course, the turkey vulture, the bright white on the beak, the whole trailing edge of the wing is white, and then we've got the black vulture, a little more subtle. But this is what they're going to look like. They're not going to look that good when you look up at them. And this is where you go to behavior. The turkey vulture is an incredible flight machine. When one of the birds is just wibble, wobble, 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 and hardly ever flaps its wings, that's your turkey vulture. If the bird is wobble, wobble, flap, wobble, wobble, flap, that is your black vulture. It's got a heavier wing load. It can't support itself just on those thermals. It has to add some effort to it. There is a third bird well east of 75 that will sometimes, especially the young, the crested caracara, which is a magnificent bird, will sometimes enter flocks of black vultures because they do all the work and find the food, and the caracara is along for the ride. I'm sorry we don't have them this side of 75, but they are gorgeous. So whenever I see a flock of black vultures, I always see, is there one with a white tail? No such luck for me. But that is what you would distinguish, even at some great distance, you would distinguish the tail. And there they are. So we're going to talk about birds of prey. Obviously, the first one that comes to mind is the eagle. Kevin McGowan at Cornell Lab of Ornithology refers to them as floating doors. And you can see that they're just dead straight. They are big bird, the head and tail being white, unmistakable. So what do I have here? What two birds do I have here? I'm seeing yellow feet. They have that in common. These are marginated primaries. Well, one is a juvenile and one is an adult. It takes 4 to 5 years for that plumage to emerge. And there's no discernible pattern that I've been able to consider that you can tell a year 1 from a year 2 from year 3. I have seen, and maybe others can add to this, I've seen that the white tail comes before the white head. And you said, well, by the time that they get the white tail, that's when all this speckling has gone off, and then the next thing will be the white head. The bald eagle is also a scavenger. If it doesn't have to do the work, it will not do the work. It has a fishing technique where it comes up behind a fish from behind, will grab it, and then will continue to fly horizontally above the surface of the water. It does not like to get wet. From whom does the bald eagle scavenge? Well, mostly from these wonderful birds, the male and the female osprey. The female is the one with a little necklace across her chest. They are a bird that this is called kiting. They and kingfishers can do this. And these birds do not scavenge. They are hardworking birds, and they are specialists. So this time-lapse photography, you can see that he or she has not taken its eyes off the prey, coming down, getting into this landing mode. Those feet are right down, and you can see, we'll talk about this in just a second, those claws are set up to grab 2 by 2, not 3 and 1. And those claws are full of little sticky pads, and this female has done well there. It's called facultative, and I can't even pronounce it. But what it is the outside third. Ordinarily, a bird will have 3 toes to the front and 1 to the back, and mostly so to osprey, except that when they need to, they can bring this third toe to the back, and that gives them an enhanced grip on that fish and can hold it forward, and then all that little Velcro on the pad also really helps. So the rumor, the urban legend that they can drown, it's rare. It can happen, but they have those great long legs, and if a young bird miscalculates the depth and the size of a fish, it can come to peril. Once the bird has locked on to the fish, it can't unlock until it lands, and that's what springs the joint. However, they can go really pretty deep because these wings are designed to pull them and lift them up out of the water. So it's pretty rare that they would drown, and certainly not an experienced bird. All right, how many birds are on, how many different species are shown here? 1, 2, 10, 4. They're all the red-shouldered hawk. This is where knowing your plumage comes in very handy. The bird in the center is a juvenile. It has streaking on the chest. The adult has banding, red-shouldered. So you'd say, well, this is a red-shouldered hawk. I'll buy that. That's a red-shouldered hawk. Well, this is also a red-shouldered hawk. And the one we're more likely to see in Florida, it is a pale morph. So knowing that you have 2 morphs and that you have the juvenile and the adult form, but what's really helpful to watch is the tail. You can see the banding in the tail. That's something of a giveaway. Red tail hawk, less common here, but still seen, a little bigger, and also there's just nothing else like that red tail. So some common land birds. Florida is really interesting that we have birds that are typically migratory who are permanent residents here. They know when they've got it made is what I think the case is. So this adults with their colt Sometimes there'll be two, more frequently one. Then we have some common birds. That these Eugene Schieffelin, it's not quite sure what he was up to, whether he wanted every bird that was in Shakespeare's plays released in the U.S., whatever. He was quite mistaken about that, the appropriateness of that. And so the European house sparrow, the population is immense, and they are a nuisance because they're such a successful breeders. And I've got families of them that come to my little patio in Maine, and they are terrific parents. They are just really all over their chicks, and they do a really good job. But they have taken over. They're all over the world. Starlings are another bird that were released again in New York. I just read recently with the starling. These are the little stars in the plumage, and they are a beautiful bird. One way, if you've got a nondescript dark bird that you're looking, it's got a short stubby tail. That's one of the field marks for if you can't really see the plumage. And these, of course, are the birds that do those fantastic murmurations. So while we're talking about dark birds, we have two kinds of crows here. They have different sizes, but there's some overlap. And again, when you're looking at one bird, it's really hard to tell what the size exactly is. Is it bigger than a bread box? Is it smaller than a raven? One difference here is the number of the emarginated primaries. These are 2, 4, 6, 7, and there are only 6 over here. I assure you from experience, don't try to count those while a bird is in flight. It cannot be done. You can tell by the sound, by the vocalization. The fish crow goes, uh-oh, uh-oh. And the bigger, and the American crow make a lot of different vocalizations. They also mimic each other. So the foolproof way to tell is if you're west of 75, they're fish crows. And if they're east of 75, they're American crows. So let's stick with blackbirds for a little bit. The common grackle, dark shiny bird. The female cryptic, mostly for safety on the nest. The male, the thing about the common grackle is this eye. That gleaming eye is unmistakable. Even in flight, you can pick out that eye. Sometimes the tails will look a bit longer than they really are, and a little more keel-shaped than should be true for a common grackle. But if you're trying to distinguish, is it a common or a boat-tailed, that's the eye. The eyes have it. The boat-tail grackle does have this great keel-shaped tail, but no bold golden eye. A dark bird, bluer, much bluer, and again a cryptic female. Red-winged blackbird. So he's the male has those epaulets. It's a proxy for studliness. When he sings his song spread, we hear it in the spring, he is flashing those epaulets, saying, "Look, what a great provider I will be, honey." He can also, when necessary, hide those epaulets, depending on whatever kind of territorial dispute, or if there is some kind of rivalry where he wants to concede, he will hide his epaulets. The northern cardinal is again this is a bird that is the state bird of many, many states. A beautiful bird, all-purpose bill. The American robin. I think the American robin is a very likely bird to survive climate change. It is omnivorous. It can inhabit any number of climates. It can eat anything, and it can move. It can move. So I think this bird will be sticking around for a long time. The pileated woodpecker, nature's engineer. So they start the process of taking dead wood breaking down its nutrients and returning them to the soil to be recycled. They're currently the largest woodpecker in America. We have a lot of them here. Of course, the ivory-billed woodpecker was much larger, but has been lost. Sad story. So they excavate their nests in dead wood that is maybe 2 to 3 years old. They never reuse their nests, so they are creating cavity nests for other creatures to come in. Recently at Shamrock, we've had a colony of feral honeybees have taken over. You can see the male has this malar stripe here, and they're getting their little crest. It's so cute. So another very common, probably the most common of our woodpeckers is the red-bellied, and you can see that they've got this little blush under here. But why, say people to me, aren't we calling them red-headed? Because look, they have their red heads. Well, because we have a red-headed woodpecker and its entire head is red. There are several preserves in our area that have red-headed woodpeckers. And we were talking about this a little bit earlier between the downy and the hairy woodpecker. There's, you know, when you see one bird, it's just, is that bird 7 inches or 9 inches? Well, it's really hard to tell. But this has got a whisk. Look at the size of that beak. That is a really fragile, frail beak compared to this beak. Everything else is pretty much the same. This is just lifted here. But that is the marker that I go by. I look to the beak, and who knows, maybe I make a mistake in my ID, but that's what I'm going to look for. So Bobby, I hope that helps you going forward. So we got some generalists. This is, of course, the mockingbird, the northern mockingbird that is the state bird of Florida. You can tell the age of a mockingbird by the extent of its repertoire. They usually do repeats of 4 or 5 times and then go on to the next segment. If the bird is only repeating the theme once or twice, you probably got a brown thrasher. Not a bird you see as often, but the mockingbird does a repeat. I'll take its theme 5 or 6 times, then go into the next segment. Very similar looking bird. Here's the northern mockingbird. The loggerhead shrike is a little bit smaller, has a much thicker eye line, very territorial, very predictable. You can almost say with certainty where on a wire you'll see a loggerhead shrike once it's established territory. The blue jay, I've just always kind of poo-pooed this bird as being a loud squawker. I'm starting to think there's more to it than that, but this is an unmistakable bird with that spectacular plumage that it's hard for us to see the difference between males and females. Somewhere in their spectrum of sight, they're seeing differences. The same is true of my favorite bird, the Florida scrub-jay. They can definitely see the difference between males and females and individuals. And you can see they're much duller. They don't have a crest. They don't have as elaborate a marking. Both birds are incredibly intelligent. All the corvids are. The belted kingfisher. This is, the plumage doesn't change through the year, but this is the female with her belly band here. The male doesn't have that. They make a nice rattle. You can hear them when they're coming, and they hover, they kite, and they come in for some pretty small fish. This year was a bonanza year for the tree swallow. During our Christmas bird count, at some point we just said, look, we've got several hundred now. We just have to stop counting because we're not going to see anything else. So we had to round up and estimate, but all through southern Florida, it was a big bumper crop of tree swallows. There's insectivores that sometimes, though, in the fall migration, they'll come down and strip wax myrtles of their berries because that gets them nice and fueled up. So This is the bird that doesn't know where it belongs. The killdeer is a shorebird, but loves to be in the fields. We had another banner year for killdeer here. This is the bird with the double collar, double ring. The junior birds, the juvenile birds, have only one ring. The second ring comes with adulthood. So that's the key to go to shore birds. I'm not in the business of selling books, but I am in the business of making birding easier for my friends. And this is it's not a great book, but it's a great beginner book. They say just pick one bird and really know that bird. And then whatever you see, compare it to the bird you know. Is it bigger? Is it smaller? Is the bill upturned or downturned? Anyway, so this is a pretty good book to have at hand. And it's not expensive. We're going to start hard and get easier. The peeps are very hard. They're all these little birds under 7 inches, and they all run around. The best thing here, I fortunately have gone on lots of expeditions with a wonderful naturalist in Maine, and he has helped me over the years. But they're just not easy. So pick one that is really outstanding, and you can start with a semi-palmated plover. Learn that bird, and then you can compare. Or start with a sanderling. Is it running back and forth in the waves? It's a sanderling. So, or if you want to sound very sweet, just say, "Oh, the peeps are so hard," and then you'll sort of sound like you know what you're talking about. By the way, piping plover. We do a lot of monitoring at the beaches in Maine in the summer for our piping plover populations, and then those numbers are going up and up and up. So birds that are not hard to tell, the ruddy turnstone is one, named for its habit of turning stones and finding what's under it. There's no other bird that's going to have this kind of white. You know, where's the white? Well, the white is a stripe down the back. The black-bellied plover. Well, again, this is a bird that plumage is going to make a big difference. Posture will always be a useful tool. But here is something that there are only 2 birds in America that have this black underarm, the axillary black here, and the other is a prairie falcon, not likely to be confused with that black-bellied plover. So this is a bird we'll often see in the summer. Some first-year birds don't elect to go north. They're better off, taking a year off, and they'll have better success the second year. So we see both of these plumages here. A willet, nice bird. Again, no bird is going to have this kind of big W, big V on its back. Nice bird, usually solitary. Like the piping plover, it's a bird that's very alert to threat. Piping plover and the willet will be the birds to call an alarm, and the other birds will respond. The black skimmer, one of only 3 skimmer species. The other 2 are in Asia, that razor-sharp bill. So I have to share the excitement we had last spring. I live on a freshwater pond, and we had several days in a row 2 black skimmers who came, and we were not able to get photographs of them. We were too busy jumping up and down, and they were just so fast. But it was really a thrill. So I'm sure this crowd knows for sure there's no such word as a seagull. No, some kind of Russian playwright got that wrong. There are gulls. There are laughing gulls. There are Bonaparte gulls, glaucous gulls, Icelandic gulls, but they're gulls. We have a lot of transient gulls. We have 2 common gulls here. The laughing gull. This laughing gull goes through a big plumage change, changes the color of its beak even from the summer to non-breeding to breeding. It has a dark gray back, so in flight you can see that dark gray, but the underwing reads very dark. The other is the ringbill gull, hence the ring. Much paler, yellow legs, yellow feet. And in flight, those yellow feet are something that can really be picked out if you look for them. But even in shade, this is a lighter underwing. This is a much lighter underwing, but that dark tip, but only the pale underwing. So you know what those are. You've got a laughing gull. What about these two? What are we looking for? We're looking for maybe some feet. We're looking for the crispness of the dark plumage. So we have here a laughing gull and a ring-billed gull. The sandwich tern, I don't know if it's really true, but it's a small, it's a medium-sized tern. We also have leaf terns here breeding in the summer. This has a little mustard tip on its nose with mature plumage. The royal tern is bigger still. Bigger still than the royal tern is a Caspian tern, but that is a freshwater tern that we will see only very rarely. The reddish egret, this is the bird that had the slowest and least successful recovery from the plume trade. It comes in the reddish morph, and it also comes in a white morph. The place to go to see these is one usually in residence at Stump Pass and down to Bunch Beach down in Fort Myers, and then at Ding Darling, and you're going to see some nice reddish egrets there. And we're going to finish with two rarely seen birds. The spring migrant, the swallowtail kite, comes up from South America and flies up to Florida to breed. They're here now, and they put tracers on these birds, and they have birds that linger around and take their sweet time, and then other birds just make a bolt for it. So there definitely differences in the pattern of migration, but these birds are tracked. They are, as I say, I have them flying over me in North Venice, but Deer Prairie Creek and Carlson Preserve, they come up, they're spring nesters. They catch insects on flight. They're just a beautiful bird. If I can go back, the point of this is you have to know when to look up, and you have to look up in sometime between late February and really the middle of April, maybe a little longer, and that's when you're going to see them. There's no use looking up in September. You have to know the season that they're here. Another bird that you can see when you know when to look for it is the magnificent frigate bird. Now, this is a bird that cannot take a storm. It will get dashed down into the sea and meet a grisly end, but we'll talk about its characteristics. It is a magnificent, it used to be called the man of war bird, and I don't know why that changed. This gorgeous gular pouch here, it's like the red-winged blackbird epaulet. It's a proxy for stubliness. They are truly superlative birds. So they fly, and we'll talk a little bit about that, the highest ratio of wing surface to body weight. So they're very efficient flyers. But they have, like the Anhinga double-crested cormorant, they don't have a preen gland. They don't have oil in their feathers. So if they got wet, they would drown. But that hooked beak is in a long neck, so they can actually feed them. One of the tricks they have is they follow dolphins, and as fish fly out try to jump out of the water to escape from the dolphins, they will come down and just grab them. They don't grab them by their feet because they've got teeny little feet that aren't good for much, but they can grab them with their beak. So these are just a few details. They can soar for 2 months at a time. They don't come back to land. They can fly high and long. And this is one of the most amazing things, again, with a record of 40 miles without a wing beat. Now that is efficient flight. Can soar for 2 months. Well, you ask yourself, when does it take a nap? And the answer is like marine mammals, they possess this ability called unihemispheric sleep, that they can set one half of their brain, and this is automatic, they don't have to think about it, put one half of their brain to sleep at a time, the other half stays awake, and they remember to fly, and just like marine mammals come up so they don't drown. And that is how they do it. And they switch back and forth. That's also how long distance migrants do it. But what they cannot do is get wet in a storm. So if there's a storm front coming, start looking up, especially us, right here in Venice, we will get to see them. They're a very slowly reproducing bird, one egg per clutch every 2 years. So they're very, very slow, high investment bird. So a pretty abrupt segue. We know that bird populations are dropping, but we're going to end on a happy note. So these is across all types of birds. One of the major problems is it's called temporal trophic mismatch, time and food. Trophic is it's a Greek word which means nourishment or energy or food, and temporal, of course, time. And this is how, after millennia of a pretty steady climate for like 18,000 years and more, that the clutches would be hatching just as there was the biomass explosion in the Arctic. Well, insects do respond to time, but they also respond to temperature. Birds respond to time. So insects, in just 40 years, well, this is saying 20, but it's gone back a little farther. The biomass explosion is occurring now 2.5 weeks earlier. The bird arrival is coming back a little bit too, and that is probably less an adaptation than it is a winnowing. When birds migrate, some go up early, some go up in the middle, and some go up late. And then depending on the year, some of those birds will make it and some of those won't. And this is, I should get some science for this, but the birds that are going up early, who are having their clutches earlier, are going to have access to the biomass at a time when their birds need it most. So those early flight birds will survive, and then their offspring will be early flight birds. Anyway, so that is one way that because this is really very dramatic change in behavior in a very short time. So we hear about all the reasons for this loss, and one is, of course, we hear about loss and fragmentation of habitat, but it's also the loss of native plants in the habitat. And this matters because if we want to have butterflies and moths and so forth, we have to have native plants that host their caterpillars, and we want caterpillars because native plants feed native critters. So if you want birds, and I'm thinking Audubon, you're interested in birds, we need native plants to host native caterpillars, native Lepidoptera, then their caterpillars, there are sufficient caterpillars to feed the native birds that we like. So if you weren't lucky enough to attend the spectacular Zoom webinar from Doug Tallamy last fall, it is available on YouTube. If you do YouTube Tallamy, and it's probably the 6th or 7th one down, he put a camera at a chickadee nest and counted 9,000 caterpillars for 3 chickadee chicks. That's 3,000 caterpillars a chick. And they continued to be fed for another couple of weeks once they're outside of the nest. So we need to plant native. So I urge anybody who didn't see it to go see that. If you are a brand new birder, this is a good book to get because it's arranged by color. If you know your way around the taxonomic guides a little bit, I would recommend either or both of these two books. There's historically a bias against birds, books that used photographs, but I think the quality of these books has really improved. So this Bill Pranty is photographs, and this Mar and Kale is illustrated, but they're both excellent books. As for equipment, I'm not qualified to talk about it, but I am qualified to tell you where to go. So both Audubon and the Cornell Lab of Ornithology have great websites that take you through the characteristics by price range and help you decide what might be the best equipment for you. And that brings us to the end. So I will ask the first question. Do eagles dream? And I think they do. I think they dream big. I don't know who put this silly picture together, but I really do love this. So I've been screen sharing for a long time now, but I'm ready to relinquish control to Rick if he's still with us.